All right, so I'm gonna take a crack at building out part of this React Hangman exercise. Because I think it'll be useful to see and useful to reinforce the lecture today, because I know there was an awful lot of stuff in there. And I'm gonna pull up the assignment as well. So I have it, so I can also see my other screen as reference. And so here's how to go about this. First off, we know we're gonna need a React project, so I might as well do that. I'm gonna do some design with CLDraw, but let me do what is it, npm create beats, and we'll name it. It's in this directory, in fact, so I'll do create beat with the dot. Remove existing files and continue. Let's say no. Oh, it's gonna cancel it. Okay, we will just create it inside here. So let's go in here and really this Hangman directory is my project root directory. So I have an extra layer, but it's not too bad. And I'm gonna go ahead and run npm install. Whenever I'm like actually doing work, I really like to get everything organized. So, and I like to make sure stuff runs because I make a lot of typos. So I'm just running my code all the time. Because if I have a typo, if I'm accidentally in the wrong directory, if I run my code, that's how I find out. So I know I've got the app running. I know we don't want all this other stuff. So I'm just gonna, again, sort of clean house and delete everything that we don't want, all this default CSS. And all this stuff inside app.jsx, the React logo. Use state we might use later, so we'll leave it. Not going to use that, but let's just go ahead and delete that and just put a return statement with the fragment, and we'll just stick an H1 in there that says Hangman. And so now I've got a V project set up, and now we can actually get to work. So we need to make a Hangman game. I'm not going to go through the rules of the game too much. In essence, the user has to guess a word one letter at a time, and they have a certain number of guesses. And we need a text input and a button to submit the guessed letter. If the user guesses the same letter twice, we need that alert pop-up that the browser can do. We need to show the wrong guesses that are not part of the puzzle word, right? Which is the correct word. There is this extra requirement here. The app.js's component state should only have two things, puzzle and guessed letters, which is our way of forcing you to make components. And so here's this JSON array, and we need to store it somewhere, and we need to do stuff. But before I'm gonna do all this, I'm gonna design my React application. I'm gonna start by building the UI. So here's the browser, and let's just say up here, I wanted to say Hangman. And I know that we need to show the puzzle word, letters separated by spaces, letters that haven't been guessed yet should be shown as an underscore, letters that have been guessed should be displayed. So let's say we're going to have here a component named like puzzle word guesses or something like that. And it's going to look something like this. Right? And if my word is hello, and the user guesses E, we'd see E show up there. Otherwise, these would be blank. So that's probably going to be one component. The truth is, you don't need all these components for this. I probably wouldn't use all these components. but it is good practice and it is good design principles. We need the text input and a button to submit the guest letter. Or I would build it all in app.js and slowly turn it into components as needed. But this design process is a really good way to go about it. So we need the user input. And this is probably going to be another component as well. And let's make this black. And we're going to need a button. So let's make it an oval. And our button's going to say guess. And then I'm going to have an input field. And let's make it orange. And I'll try to kind of use orange to indicate stuff that does stuff. So I think this should be orange as well. I'll try to use orange to indicate user input. Right, and here's the text input where the user guesses something. And I think part of this component's job will be show alert if user guesses a letter already guessed. And that's just going to be sort of like a note to myself. So maybe I'll kind of put it off to the side here, just as like a sort of FYI. And let's say that this component is going to be called, let's just call it input form. And we need to show the letters that have been guessed that are not part of the puzzle word. And let's say that's going to be another component. And let's say that it's going to be called bad guesses. Right. And so here, maybe we see like X and Q. I think there's a couple other things we need, maybe guesses remaining and some other stuff, but let's cross that bridge later. I would like, if I was doing this for real, like maybe what I would just do is here in app.jsx, I would maybe add like to do and make it. Maybe I'll just make some JavaScript comments here and like to do for later. Show remaining guesses. Show a win-lose message. And I am going to make a component for that because I can think about that pretty easily, and we'll call it like show win-lose message. Unless the README is telling me I need to end up using an alert, we'll maybe have a component showing like if the user wins or loses. So I think this is a pretty good starting point. I'm making some notes of stuff I'm going to do later. And so let's just make my to-do list for now. I need to make the puzzle word guesses component. And if I was doing this for real, I would actually write all this out because I find the pseudocode very useful. In the interest of time, since we have it here as well, I'm just going to start writing code. So I know that I want to organize my code by having a components directory and putting all of these individual components in there. I also know that in the README, there's this array of words, and that needs to live somewhere. And I'm going to make a directory named data, and we'll put it there. And let's go ahead and create a file for that. And it is good to do this on the command line for practice. In the interest of time, I'm creating files here, which is not the end of the world. And in fact, now that I've created this, I might as well just import it into app.jsx and make sure I didn't do anything silly. In fact, I already see I did something silly by not closing my multi-line JavaScript comment. Let's go ahead and import, let's just call it words from data words JSON. And let's just console log it here. Just to make sure, again, that I haven't done anything silly. I didn't make a mistake when I copy and pasted the code or anything like that. And I'm looking good. I see possible words here twice, if you notice when I refresh the page. And the reason that happens is because of this React strict mode component that does some special stuff. For reasons not getting into, worth getting into at the moment, strict mode causes our React app to render twice because sometimes there are subtle errors that creep in that you can see when you have it rendered twice as things get more complex with state and use effect. But for now, it's confusing, so we should just get rid of it. So now let's make some of these components, right? And actually I am going to write down my component name so I don't have to keep hopping back and forth between the TL draw and the other one, right? So I need puzzle word guess. I need input form. I need bad guesses, and show win lose message I will save for later. So let's just go ahead and make these files. And input form.jsx. And each of these files is going to hold just one React component and bad guesses.jsx. And I think actually I'll have this be a div just for the heck of it. And I'll put just an H3 in there and we'll say like bad guesses just so I can see something on the screen. And then I want to export this. And I would recommend to all of you to not copy and paste, to type it out, but to like do a split screen and use it as a reference, because I do think building up the muscle memory and like getting used to using tab completion and stuff is really important. Again, in the interest of time, I am going to copy and paste. And it is very common to use your own code as a guide or pattern. Mikhail, yes, sir.
Isn't there a shortcut for this? Like, I don't know if you can try it, but RFCE. If you select the whole thing and like try just select the whole thing and delete it, and RFCE, and it automatically does this for you. I think it does.
If I select the whole thing and then I hit
Yeah,
delete,
just type RFCE. Oh, you don't have it? I guess it because
yeah.
it's on mine. I think it's like a emit pass.
Oh, there very well could be. And Emmet is awesome.
It's
And you
like a
guys should use Emmet.
React functional component export, and it automatically does that for you.
Oh, that's awesome. Um, I'm so used to using Vim, so like I can highlight copy with like 3 keystrokes and with another keystroke jump to another thing and paste it in. That it honestly, I think your way is kind of a bit more efficient and cleaner. I've just gotten very used to this. Also, but Emmet is awesome, and I do recommend learning it and installing it and kind of taking that approach. And I probably should start practicing that because that is good to share and demo. What often happens, I will say, is when you're working on like existing code bases, the code is already there and there might be more stuff. So sometimes you just grab it. So nothing is showing up because I've created these, but I'm not actually importing and using them. So let's go ahead and do a little importing of puzzle word guess, of input form, and maybe let's just put bad guesses. I'll put it below it, even though on the it would make more sense. It would make more sense to have the input not be in the middle, but I don't want to rearrange the whole tail draw right now. So these components don't do anything, but now I have a bunch of great skeleton code. And now let's start doing stuff. And I do need to refer back to the README a bit to see its instructions. I'm pretty darn sure what we need to do here is grab a random letter. So I think I want to do something like word to guess equals, oh, it's something like math random, what is it like? In fact, I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember this off the top of my head. JS get random number between 0 and let's just say 50. Because it's math.random and we need to multiply it or do floor or something like that.
So for that one, it's math.floor, and then inside the parentheses, it's math.random times the length of the list.
Yep. Yep, exactly. Thank you. Yep, and that's exactly the next step here is math.random times.
And there's a parentheses after random.
Oh, thank you so much. Because I have to call it. And it probably should be words.length plus 1 in parentheses as well. So that we're multiplying by the length of the array. Well, actually, no, that should be words.length should be okay because we're 0 indexed. I think. Let's see. And this is actually a lot of code. So let's just make this, let's just call this like, I guess we'll leave it there. But I want to make this a function. Let's call it maybe like get random word, and it's going to be an arrow function. And for readability, I think I'll put it in curly brackets and have it look something like this. And we'll say return words, sub, and all this stuff. Actually, I'm gonna go back on what I said and just get rid of the curly brackets and the return because this ends up being just more succinct. And let's see if this worked or if I got something wrong. So I'm seeing a word, which is a good start. I do want to make sure. I think this should work fine because 0 index is okay. And I think that's what the +1 was for. I might be wrong, but this is good enough for government work. It's good enough for now. It's grabbing a word. It's not breaking things. So this is a good start. You know, I remember when we were looking at the number guessing game, we had to, you know, we had to think about every time the component re-renders, I don't want a new random word. So I do need to make sure we don't get new random word every time this component re-renders. I only want to grab one random word per game, right? The first time my JavaScript application, my React application runs, the first time this app component renders, I want to get a random word, but then I don't want to get another. And we can use useEffect for that, because useEffect controls when stuff happens and lets React know that it's happening. So I should be able to use a useEffect, and we know we need the arrow function and the dependency list array, which I will leave empty. And I'll put this stuff in here. And now hopefully what happens is this happens the first time this component loads and renders, but it won't happen again. And then our next step is going to be to put this in component state. And I am going to take a quick look at the README because there was a rule here. The only bits of component state in the app component should be puzzle, the puzzle word, and guess the letters. So let's go ahead and make a bit of component state for our puzzle word, the word we want to guess. I'm going to set it to an empty string. If I didn't put anything here, it would be set to undefined or null by default. Which isn't necessarily bad, but it is kind of nice to try and have some like a value always be of the same type. And JavaScript evaluates an empty string to falsely anyway, so we can easily check if the puzzle word has been created or not if we need to. And I think this is working. And to test it out, I'm just gonna stick a paragraph tag here and just stick puzzle right there. We don't actually want that for the program, but that's a really easy way for me to visually test and visually do some quality assurance QA, make sure that my code is working. And it's looking good. I'll add a note, remove later, puzzle word is, and I'll just leave that up there just so I always see it. And I'm going to do a little bit of code cleanup right now because I can just call get random word right inside here. I don't need all that stuff. The console log is kind of nice. Honestly, it actually is kind of nice to leave little console log messages as you go, like saying what's happening, like we got the puzzle word. So maybe I should have left that, but that's okay. I am also going to rename this to get puzzle word, because I like to have names be consistent. Since this is puzzle, this will be get puzzle. I don't want get puzzle and set puzzle to get too confused, so I'll leave get puzzle word. So we've got the ball rolling, but now we need to start doing some stuff with these components. But I know I need an input field. I know I need some bad guesses. I know I need some other things. So let's tackle this one at a time, and let me kind of look at the README and see what we want here. We're going to need guessed letters, but we can come back to that later. I think the next step should be, let's make this puzzle word component real. Let's pass in the puzzle, right? Because that's going to determine what we show or hide. So let me make this smaller, and let me do a split. And let's go to puzzle word guess. And now it needs to take as a prompt puzzle. And I'm just going to use the name to be the same. And I'm just gonna put it like this, just for the moment, just to make sure I'm doing this right. That code is gonna change. That's not my final form, so to speak. But again, I just want to make sure that I really like testing my code as I go. But what I actually want is I want control over showing each individual letter. I think what I can do in JavaScript is I believe an array, you can iterate through it, and JavaScript treats a string as an array. I'm going to use the node REPL to double check this to make sure I'm not totally confused. And if I do foobar.map, let's see if this works. No, so I'm actually going to use ChatGPT to remind me. Iterate through each char in string. I definitely don't want to use a for loop or for ofs. That's what I thought would have worked. Oh, I need the split. And split turns a string into an array based on a separator. If my separator is an empty string, it will separate each letter, which is a nice little trick. And that's what we're going to do here. And I think what I'm just going to do is let's just call this letters, const letters equals puzzle dot split, like that. And let's console log it to make sure I did it right. And I see down here, I now have an array of letters. Because now what I want to do is I don't want to do this. I want to do something like this. I'm going to make a div just as a container. And inside here, and let me get a little more screen real estate. I'm going to do letters dot map letter index span, which is the element, the HTML element that lets us put stuff horizontally. And there's a lot of different ways to do this, but this is sort of the quick and lazy way. Letter. And let's add p equals index. And so now I kind of have control over this, because my next step is going to be, let's go to app.css and let's make a class named show letter. And I think I'm going to use ChatGPT to help remind me how I get underlining for a span. CSS underline text span. And we can use a text decoration property. So text decoration underline, and we'll also do hide letter. So the problem here is I wanted to do display none. I want to see the underline, but not the text. Let's see if ChatGPT can help me. Otherwise, I'll take a different tack. CSS span hide text in span, but show text decoration underline. So as you can tell, there's a lot, honestly, I don't remember, but I've gotten the Googling is really the skill. So here's the trick that I'm gonna do. This is actually quite nice. And the golden rule when you're using code, whether it's from ChatGPT or Stack Overflow or anywhere else, is make sure you understand it. Right? So I'm going to take a moment to read through this to understand what it does. For hidden text, we set text decoration to underline, which is what I want. We set the color to black. It's probably black by default already, but this certainly won't hurt. Color only affects text. Background color changes the actual background color of the element. So this will actually make the text transparent. And I guess this is adding some text shadow. I don't really know if it makes a difference. Again, I'm breaking my own rule a bit in copying and pasting. I really recommend to you all to actually type it out because that's how it cements showing these. It cements learning these skills. The muscle memory really helps you learn this stuff. And I'm going to copy this stuff. I'm going to get rid of these comments that I don't care about that just clutter stuff up. That one I'll leave because it's a good reminder of what it's doing. Let's put it here as well. Just, I'm curious to see what it does. And now let's actually use this in our code. And let's also maybe do font size. Oh, large sounds good. And there's definitely a way to set all this stuff globally, but I'm being a little pragmatic. And now what I can do here is class name equals show, and this should be show text. So these two names are consistent. Show text. And it's a little hard to see, but but over here, now these letters are underlined. I think I want a shared class because there is some common stuff I want. So I'll just name it like text. And let's do maybe like font size, 24px, because large, I think that was a bad autocomplete. It doesn't seem to be doing much. And text decoration color is black in both of these, so let's put that there. Text shadow is black in both of these, so let's put it there. And the difference is really, and text decoration is underlined in both of these, so let's put that there. The difference is really, in fact, just the hide text. And in fact, show text, we may be able to get rid of entirely. And let's add some, maybe some margin left. Let's try like 16px and margin. I think just margin left 16px to see if we can't get a bit more space. And let's apply the text class name and see if that does anything. Now that is a lot more interesting and kind of nice to see. Right? The text is bigger. Let's in fact make it even bigger. Let's go for just 32 pixels. And now we're cooking, right? And now I've got some stuff underlined. And where we're going to end up with this is I don't need this show text class anymore. What I can do is you can apply more than one CSS class, right? So I can do hide text. And what did we do wrong? What does this not like? I guess I was wrong. I apologize. I would have thought that this gets applied on top of that, but maybe I'm confused. So I'll give it like 30 seconds worth of debugging, and then if that doesn't work, we will just do it the other way. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Yeah, there's probably something I'm missing here. So we'll just do it the slightly less fancy way. We'll have text, we'll have hide text, and we'll copy this stuff that we care about, and we'll put that there, and we'll put text shadow there, and we'll put the margin left there as well. And we'll just test it out by going back and forth and debugging it that way. Interesting. The text shadow, that seems to be what's causing the problem. Which just goes to show ChatGPT is not always right. Or maybe I did not understand it as well as I should have. Because now I suspect if I get rid of all this stuff, that was what I originally wanted. So we had a little bit of a digression, but we learned some good stuff along the way. But what we're going to do is for each of these letters, we're going to need to figure out if we should hide or show it. But we're going to come back to that later, I think, because we need to pass in the guesses and maybe do a bit of extra work. Though in fact, I think what I'll do is let's map this and let's take the letter and turn it into an object. And we'll do char for character is L, and we'll do show true. And I think I just need to wrap this in parentheses to return an object in a one line method like that. And this props validation, I'm just going to do a quick fix on, and I'll kind of have this ready for tomorrow. So we don't have to do that. But now L is an object. So what I want to do over here is L.char. And over here, what I want to do is put some JavaScript in here, and it's going to be, I think I'm just going to do a tag template literal and do L.show. And if L.show is true, we'll return text. Otherwise, if it's false, we'll return text hide text. And now we have some conditional rendering. And to test that this works, I'm going to change show to be false by default, and all those letters disappear. So now I can hide and show individual letters. And when I do, I can see it's a little ugly the way that this changes, but I can see the number of letters there. And so I'm kind of setting myself up. Right, and this is a lot of work, and we haven't even done much with component state yet, but we can add in all this interactivity to get ready. And the next step is clearly we're going to be passing in the letters the user has guessed. And I think I will be wrapping up soon because we have covered a lot of ground with this, and I don't want to entirely solve it. I think maybe a good stopping point is let's get something happening in the input form. And then I'll kind of show how the data and the logic flows. And then I'll pause and leave the rest to you all. So we know that we also need to have guesses. And in fact, if I pull up the README, it'll tell me I need to have guessed letters. So let's just go ahead and make that bit of component state. And we'll just come back to it later. And it's going to be an empty array, because as I guess each letter, it's going to be added to the array. And I need to add a set guessed letters. And eventually guessed letters is going to get passed into a prop here to puzzle word guess as well. I think I'll show that now just so we can see it. So let's expand on this a bit and do guessed letters. And over here, let's pass in guessed letters as a prop as well. And as always, I'm going to use a console log to make sure that I don't have any typos in my code. And I'm going to give myself a nice little message so I know where I am. Because now all of a sudden that console log is way nicer to read. And so if I wanted to test this more, I could add like X in there as a guest letter, right? And this is what we're going to end up doing, is adding these in one at a time. Now, what you do with the guest letters inside this puzzle word guest component, I will leave as an exercise to you all to do. Use guest letters to hide show letters that have been not guessed or guessed. I guess to rephrase that, to hide, to show letters that were guessed and hide the ones that weren't. All right, so that will be a to-do for everyone else. I think the last piece here is let's build out this input form and kind of see what happens there. And I know I need a button and an input field. I'm not going to worry too much about a form field, but I am going to add an input field. And I'm going to give it a placeholder that's going to say guess a letter. I'm going to add a button. And we'll call it submit guess. And I want to add just some simple like on click logic for stuff. So let's do a handle click for my button. The clicking works. We learned that form fields, I want to store those form field values in React component state. And let's just call it input field, set input field, something simple, and we'll set it to an empty string. And now that I've done this, I can hook this up here where I can say input value equals input field and my apologies, placeholder is guess a letter. And now handle click should update the input field with and I apologize, I may have missed a step here because we do need to grab the value of this. And if I check the README, I'm pretty sure it does want me to use a button. And this is where a form can be useful, to be honest. But there's another way that we can do this. Let's call this handle submit. And let's write another function called handle input field change. And this will take an event and we're going to hook this up to the input field. And what I'm going to do here is on change handle input field change. And that was a little quick, but if you do Control-Shift-P or Command-Shift-P in type format to format document, it should organize your JS code as you go, so it's nice and clean and organized. And this is how I like to keep it. Once you get used to this, it becomes a lot easier to read, though it's a different way of seeing it at first. So we actually have to do something now with this event. And so I want to do set input field to event dot target dot value. And let's see if that worked. And I think I'm going to just add a console log right here to console log input field to make sure that my component state is hooked up right. And that looks good, right? So in fact, the input field takes care of updating its own React component state that we've created for it. And this button's job is going to be able to send that letter guess somewhere else. And I do want to open up the README here, so I am going to close out some of these splits because I do want to refer back. And let me go ahead also and pull up RTL draw as a reminder of where we've been and what we're doing next. So puzzle word guesses is on its way. We're working on input form right now. And let's see what we need to do. The app.js state should only have the puzzle word and it should only have guessed letters. So here's the challenge. And let's make this a bit bigger. And we'll get rid of this right here. So here's the main app component. And these are all its children. And we saw how I can create some state, right? And we did, there was something like puzzle, set puzzle, something like that, right? And then we pass in here as prop. The state. Well, we can pass functions as props. We can pass functions as props. And so what we're going to do now is we have to do const guest letters, set guest letters, right? And this one, we're going to make an empty array. And let me move this. I apologize that this is getting a little overlappy. I'd like to keep it organized, but I don't want the arrows to hit each other too much. Set guest letters is a function that will change this bit of state. And we need to get it into the input form because the input form takes care of changing the guesses. So I need to pass set guest letters as a prop into the input form. And this we can get rid of. So that's not very, very useful. Right? Or maybe let's name this a little different. Let's maybe name it like update guest letters. Or I'll have it be the same for now. But what we're going to do is we're going to write a little wrapper function in case we need to add any extra logic. So let's see what this looks like. And then I think we'll be hitting a good pausing point. Input form needs to take now as a prop. I'm just going to call it let's just keep it simple for now, actually, I think, and let's just pass set guest letters directly in. Though actually there's a couple things that we may need to do. So we need to make some design choices. For instance, if the letter has already been guessed, then we need to display an alert. So I need to decide where in my program that's going to happen. Because if I want that logic in this input form component, the input form also needs the letters already guessed. In the interest of simplicity, I think if we put as much logic in the top level, that lets us make input form a bit simpler. So we're going to pass in a function named handle guest letter. And there's a lot of functions named handle here, handle submit, handle click, handle guest letter. So it does get to be a bit much. And it can be a bit better, but in general, I try to use handle when it indicates we're maybe not doing it directly, but we're handling it. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a function, and I'm just going to name it handle guest letter for consistency's sake. And it's going to be an arrow function. And I think what I'm going to do inside here is use set guest letters. And let's say that here is the guess that gets passed in as an argument. And set guest letters is going to update an array, remember? So we're making a copy of the existing guesses, and then we're adding the new guess to it. And I think just for fun, I'll put a console log here, and it'll look like this. And you can see how this handle function has like to do show alert if letter already guessed. I can build the function up here with everything that I need. And without going into it too much, JavaScript uses something that's called a closure that stores all of the relevant variables. And then I can pass this function in as an argument, as a prop. And then here on this handle submit, in fact, all right, I don't even need to set the input field because we're doing that here with this other function. So just whenever I type in the input field, it changes itself. What I do want to do is do handle guest letter. And what we'll do is we'll grab whatever's in the input field. So, I think as like a to-do, restrict user to only have one char in input field. That's something that's nice to do later. We're not going to worry about it right now. And again, this red squiggly is from some props validation stuff, which I'll try to set up later, but we're just going to add a disable checker for it for now. And so now what I should be able to do is when I go over here, and let's just refresh the page. I can type a letter A, right? Or B or C. But now when I hit submit guess for C, that calls handle submit, which calls handle guess letter, which is a function we've passed in as a prop. And all the logic is actually up here in our top level component in app. And here I handle updating the state of guest letters. Here's where I'll handle showing an alert if the letter is already guessed, because here I already have that state. And so this way, I don't have to pass in more props to the input form. I don't have to pass in the puzzle words, the correct word. I don't have to pass more stuff in. I don't have to pass in the full list of guest letters. I just need to pass in the function that holds all the logic up from this parent level. So fingers crossed this will actually work. And indeed, we see guest letters now has C. If I say I add F, we now see C and F. Right. And so what we've done is here's this sort of visual diagram. Let's make a bit of a tree diagram, and we'll make this blue, and then I think that will be a good stopping point. And let's make this large. Right? As a child, app has puzzle word guess. Input form. And what I've done is pass a function as a prop, right, into input form. And for puzzle word guess, we pass state as a prop. Right? So the parent passes its state and logic down as props into the children. And that's how the children can kind of phone home, so to speak. And let's see if I can't curve this arrow the way I would like to. Right? And that has been passed as a prop. And I can call this function that I've passed as a prop in the input form. And I apologize for the massiveness of this. We're gonna make it less massive in just a moment. That's probably a good middle ground. Though the arrows get a little messy. But this is the loop and the reactivity of React. So this is probably a good stopping point, because we've covered a lot of ground. There's still a lot left to do, but we've gotten a lot done. And so just to recap, and we can look at the elements here. We can use React DevTools to look at the component tree here. I have state at the top level of my app. I have this sort of helper utility function, which maybe could even exist outside app. But since we're importing words from a JSON file, but for a full stack app with the backend, we might actually be making an API call to get that word. Maybe, maybe not. A use effect, so we don't change our puzzle word every time. There's a re-render, like say when guest letters changes. And then here we have the puzzle word component, the input form component, and bad guesses, which we didn't do a lot with. And if I go into puzzle word, and let's just use this go to definition keyboard shortcut, I have guessed letters, I have show true, and what I want to do is I want to find out if each letter exists in guessed letters, and if it is, I want this to be true or false. So I think what I'll do is I'll flesh this out a bit, but then I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer, so to speak. So we're going to need to give this arrow function a little more breathing room. And we're going to need to return an object here. And we'll add that there. And my map needs to be closed. And what I want is to do make show true if letter L is in guessed letters. Right? Because if my JavaScript object property name is the same as the variable name, this is a nice syntax I can use that's the same as doing this. So right now it's set to false and it won't show anything. But now that we have this guessed letters array, I want to use it to check an update here. And I'll leave that as an exercise to the user, so to speak. All right, and that is the video. I think there's a couple folks hanging out here, and thank you. I kind of was burning at full speed through stuff, so thanks for being understanding. Do you guys have any questions or stuff that you might want to go over before we wrap? And I'll just stop the recording.